Well, I am in the process of uploading several episodes that are later going to air on Open Signal, which is basically cable access in Portland, Oregon. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'm going to talk about that at the beginning here of our discourse. So for me, this is going outside the box of the internet. This is sharing my light and my knowledge where I'm at right now with an audience outside of social media. And whether or not people respond to that or not, being that consciousness is what it is, and I would say that in Portland and in a lot of places like that, and in the world in general, there absolutely is a war on the alternative media. And absolutely, there's massive discrimination towards anyone perceived to be a conspiracy theorist. However, I still am reaching out to my own hometown because I do believe that there is the possibility of some people having the spark within, just like some of you may have the spark within. And as I advised you before, I will again, don't unconsciously come to the aid of unconscious other men and women or people that you identify to be of your own tribe. Because the reality is consciousness is in the toilet, and we need to be honest with that fact. And I intend to point out a lot of things that I do know about Portland. And as it did in the past, it's going to upset the egos of some of those individuals that don't know how to separate themselves and their own value from that of a place. And a lot of Americans in the AmeriCult have the exact same problem. They hear about America being criticized, and at least they said this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a little bit less today, more so during the George Bush years. If you don't love it, leave it. Well, if you look at the case of Portland, Oregon, there's a lot of people that are, in fact, leaving Portland or planning to leave Portland. It's not that they stopped loving Portland. It's that it has become too much of a cesspool, like it is with America, because people do care about America, aspects of it which are good, as opposed to some other more corrupt societies and violent cultures. It's because we care that we speak out about the blind spots. So when it comes to the world, when it comes to society, when it comes to America, when it comes to Portland, Oregon, where I'm originally from, and I have a lot to say about that place, there are many blind spots that the people suffer from. So if we are to overcome ego, then we need to overcome those knee-jerk reactions that we might have when we hear about aspects of our own society being criticized. Okay, so I want this to be kind of a relaxed discussion, probably about 1 hour in length. There's going to be a combination of videos that I produce and just standard audio recordings. There's no need to be on camera all the time. There does seem to be a need, I feel, within, although not to do it every day, but to do it on a regular basis throughout the course of my lifetime. Oh, there will be breaks. There has to be breaks. But to constantly be engaged in the act of attempting to speak the highest truth possible with the agenda of waking up the most people possible. And that in and of itself is a spiritual act, is a way of life, and not everybody's on the same path. There's a lot of people that are straight up misusing their talents, their gifts, their privilege. Yes, some people in the modern day and age have more privilege than others, especially when it comes to the algorithms. And it's easier for some people to easily fall into the left or the right, so they can then end up in an echo chamber of people that think just like them. And when you're not of the atypical left or right, especially in the modern day and age, and you're somewhat of a person that could be considered somewhat of a conspiracy theorist, then you're going to have problems on your hands. Because a lot of people into mainstream conspiracy theories don't realize that they're on the dark side of conspiracy theory. Don't realize how much they're manipulated by the algorithms. Don't realize how deep they have fallen into various falsehoods. So when someone wants to say to me, hey, Alex, meet this friend of mine, he's a conspiracy theorist. Do you think that I'm more relaxed, or do you think that I have now concerns? I'm going to have concerns. Oh, a conspiracy theorist? What kind of a conspiracy theorist? A mainstream conspiracy theorist, or one that can actually think for himself or herself without falling into political worship or anti-themism or this, that, and the other? See, that's my litmus test. Are you above the illusions of separation program? And if you question 9/11, why would you not question the history of some of these regions or care about some of these people? Yeah, there's a lot of people that want to talk about the aliens, but they miss the alien agenda staring at them right in the face. The way in which the races have been divided, the ways in which we are being hooked onto these devices and manipulated by algorithms, that's all very alien as well. Also, the way in which they've got our communications screwed up. We've got everybody on social media now. Everybody typing away back and forth. It comes across to me as insecticide. I often think to myself and wonder to myself, what would be a truly free society? What would it look like? What would an alternative planet look like where the women have their consciousness free and the men have their consciousness free? That is, they're not under mind control. There's a lot of people in this society, on this planet, that think they know a whole lot about mind control without actually knowing some of the most basics. Most of all, how they've infiltrated alternative conspiracy theories. See, they want to point the finger at the counterculture movement without looking at the infiltration in our modern day and age of figures that they trust. And so, yeah, if someone was to say to me, meet my mainstream conspiracy friend, or my friend has interest in conspiracy theories, unless that person is a content creator himself who comes up with his or her own ideas, it's mostly in today's day and age going to be suspect. And that's sad. So this, I recognize all this as being a part of the devil's deception. Ladies and gentlemen, things were very different when I started out. Things were corrupt then, and there were people stuck in the illusions of separation program long before the year 2000. But after 9/11, there was, so it seemed on the surface level, a wake up. It seemed like there was a wake up amongst society. And what I would say is there were the golden years. Some of you may remember some of those years. And, even before YouTube, there was Google. I remember Google. In many, many ways, I would say that it was an experiment, the early days of the internet, including Google Video, to see how deep the knowledge was. And certain people out there put out a lot of important content and became tools of the system themselves. There's many names that we could shout out, right? But the point is so much has changed in 20 years. And what used to feel like a movement of good folks, where we're all good guys, no longer feels like that. It no longer feels like, if you're in a room full of people that are labeled conspiracy theorists, or people that have allowed themselves to be labeled conspiracy theorists, it no longer feels like you are amongst fam or family. And so there needs to be a deep analysis that the population of the earth understands as to how conspiracy theories in the last few decades and top conspiracy theory media outlets, how they came under infiltration. And I will say to you that the infiltration that we need to be aware of is not just government infiltration, but spiritual infiltration. So while you start to see an increase in possessions, in violence and things that I've talked about for years and others may be talking about. There's no question that evil is occupying the spirit of the earth. The question is it going to crush your heart, your spirit, and occupy you as well? Or are you going to resist? What does it really mean for you to resist? What does it really mean for you to resist the matrix or what the system is doing to us? So I'm just going to go back and forth between different thoughts here. And we are at new moon. These are times to start new projects, to jump into new things. You've heard me talk about the influence of the moon cycles, but I do it from a non-astrological perspective. I'm not anti-astrology. I'm just not a big fan of the vast majority of the astrologer content creators that you're going to come across on YouTube. That, as far as I'm concerned, and others agree with me, a lot of them, they cover this superficial, this is coming into your life. This amazing thing is coming into your life. It's really going to be down to the individual what they're actually going to receive or experience. I don't necessarily subscribe to those general astrological tarot readings that are popular on YouTube. But I know the basics. And these are times in which people might go through an increase in anxiety or fear or tension or experience some sort of health issue. Based on your star sign, you might be more affected by certain new moons rather than others. We went through a pretty intense full moon. And so keep in mind that these new moons and full moons are coming after the October eclipse. So we're still dealing with some intense energy. But now that we're a few months out from that event, of course, which is, if you remember, the time in which this situation in Gaza and Israel really kicked off. Not a surprise there. So we've seen a waning of some of the intensity, but we are coming up on April of 2024. So who knows what types of world events we're going to see. Just know when it's time for you to take a break from the internet. And if you have loved ones in your life, children that are also addicted to their smartphone, I don't really give advice to people with families, but I might as well continue to share the thought. If it's not going to be a problem and you are able to positively influence the people in your life, if you happen to have a husband, if you happen to have a wife, if you happen to have children, if you happen to have parents, if there's a way that you can share your light with them, you should do it. I think that you need to have the discernment as to what you should and should not share. And we might think that we have the discernment and we know that they're going to be receptive to certain things. A lot of people are not going to be receptive to family or family members, regardless of the family member. And there's different reasons for this that are different to each family unit. But it is that season, isn't it? Where people are communicating with family and quote unquote loved ones. I expressed in a past recording why I'm not a big fan of the holidays, whether it be birthdays, 4th of July. Truth be told, I've had a fair amount of traumatic events happen to me on a number of these holidays. 4th of July included, birthday included, Christmases included. So, for those of you that are really annoyed when you hear that Christmas music playing on the radio or playing at the store, you're not alone in feeling just a little bit annoyed and wanting to get through the holiday season. That doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make me a bad person. It makes us human and shows that we are resistant to this consumeristic programming. So I'm not opposed necessarily to the idea of holidays. It's what the human beings are doing with these holidays. People should be shine their light every day of the year. Now, I can see why Amazon rules the world, however, on another angle here, as I paid a ridiculous amount to ship a box to another human being. Just outrageous. Whereas if I just would have bought on Amazon, could have got more stuff. See, that's how they get us. They get us through our own greed. So I understand people want to share items. I think that in this day and age, where we're so close to collapse, I don't have like a recommended shopping list for you. But if people were to go on, say, a shopping spree for friends and family, if they have, say, the family and they have the money, I would be recommending vitamins, supplements, certain like cool survival preparedness items that you can use right now in your home. Certain types of coffee makers. Again, I'm not drinking coffee, by the way, at the moment. I think it's like day 16 for me. But I was thinking about one of those hand crank coffee grinders that I recall seeing years ago for about 20 bucks. They're probably 30 or 35 now. I may have bought one as a gift for a relative in the past. My point is, when people go out and they purchase products, and I'm not one to say that I'm a perfect example of this, we should seek to purchase things that have a long-term use or application, that are not just products that we buy because it's the holidays. When we get into that type of habitual behavior, it can be argued that the aspects of the zombie apocalypse, aspects of it, have infected us, where we're just going through the motions as people buy their Christmas cards and they buy their toys. I got to say, on that note, there's definitely been a massive degradation of quality of toys. It would be definitely quite the experience to go back in my adult body right now in a time machine. Back to, say, 1982, 1983, 1984. I remember my mother's ex-boyfriend at the time, who I call the A-Man. He bought me some He-Man action figures. They were actually stolen by some children where I was staying with my mother in Seattle, Washington, by the way, in 1986. But that's another story. Children can be so cruel, seriously. But I think there's definitely a major difference in the quality in toys. They're much more interesting back in the day for a number of different reasons. And now there's just... And then, of course, you've got the quote-unquote woke messaging within toys themselves, which I talked about in a recent video. So, you can look at the modern toy section and see the programming for society. The programming of the super soldier outfits, or for the women to become whores, to be frank. For years, I could think back 10 years ago during the Black Friday years, filming at Walmart, the zombie whore dolls. And on the topic of zombie, I did come across a box of cereal for zombies recently at Target. It was a little startling, not surprising. Took a picture of it. Probably will share with you later. Make sure you're subscribed to my Substack page. I will share it there probably at some point. But yeah, you can see the direction that they're taking the children in through the toys, through the video games, through the children's books, through the movies. And so, yes, I did take a break from uploading recently. I also have taken a break from watching streaming video content that is Netflix, Tubi. I do watch some of it once in a while, but basically I try to create these breaks. And you should too. Periods where you just don't watch anything. Or if you do watch something, you're not hooked up to the internet. And this is not something that I read from any book on psychic self-defense or spiritual warfare. A lot of the ideas that I have now about the spiritual warfare taking place on the internet, I came to on my own. There may be some parallels in some of the things that I am saying with other speakers or other researchers, and I would find those parallels to be very, very interesting. But there is not a massive amount of written content on the topic of spiritual warfare over the internet today. Again, there are books on spiritual warfare, but how the internet can add on to that is just something that is very, very, very new, and it's something that we need to discuss. And so, being that I'm looking to expand the number of ways in which I protect myself spiritually, because when you're a beacon of light, you can attract negative entities, even if you're doing good. And these entities could be drawn in from the internet, or they can be drawn in from the environment that you're living in. And some of the environments that we are living in here on Earth are hotbeds of paranormal activity, where various spirits known by various names, we've talked about the names in the past, tend to dwell. So I would say that the area that I'm in now is a place of many of these spirits. There are even some rural areas out there that may seem like there will be less spirits because there may be in the mountain range area. This is the way that I used to look at things, and to a certain degree still do. You know, you look at a mountain rural area where there's a light population versus, say, a place like Portland, Oregon, that's definitely haunted, definitely has a corrupt, violent past, definitely has many ghosts living within the region of Portland, Oregon. Of course, not limited to, of course not, but it definitely is a place in which there is a higher than average amount of paranormal activity. And so there's a number of different reasons why I got away from Portland. But there are certain years in which the poltergeist factor is off the charts in relation, I believe, to the solar cycle and perhaps other factors. So yeah, I found myself trying to get away from that paranormal infestation through my off-grid endeavors, but I've come to find that many of those off-grid areas as well have their own infestations. It could deal with a number of different reasons: the magnetism of that area, the previous treatment of the Native Americans of that area, certain activities of the locals in that area. Like, for example, in the San Luis Valley of Costilla County, there are some rumors of satanic cults over the years dwelling in that area. So yeah, you can be a beacon of light in an area of many, many jinn, archons, demons, unclean, dirty spirits, to be frank. And you can still survive. I'll just tell you now, I did have a dream where I was in an urban environment where there were many of these black entities. And I mean black, not African American black, but black entities. And they were saying to themselves, this guy caused us to lose the game. Yeah, I've also told you in the past about certain people that appeared possessed that I came across on YouTube that would actually speak about the things that the demons were telling them. So it was very insightful. I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, one person wanted to know why God allows these demons in this realm. And those are good questions. What I do feel confident saying is that we do live in this type of a realm where these things are going on for a reason. It isn't an accident. It is absolutely for a reason why we live in this type of a world. And we should seek to find out what we're doing here on a soul level for our own. It's not going to come from a church. It's not going to come, likely. It's likely not going to come from a mosque, at least not an average mosque. Not that I'm aware of. And so, yeah, we definitely are in a period in society that is very unspiritual. There are people that claim to be spiritual. They claim to offer spiritual services. And you can pay, and you can pay, and you can pay, and you can pay some more until you can pay no more. But what I see is a real lack of spirituality, loving, brotherhood, sisterhood amongst the population. And there is a real resistance within the collective consciousness of this society, not just the American society, but we've talked about the unconsciousness of other cultures and countries outside the US. So this problem that we're dealing with most of society being unconscious, is a planetary problem. So I would encourage people to seek the answers for themselves as to what they're doing here. And do they have anything to contribute while they're here? Because not all human beings feel called to create their own content. I understand that. There's a lot of problems that can come with creating your own content, pushing back against the system, exposing how much you know, and doing it with your given birth name. And even if you don't use your given birth name, you still can attract certain energies or forms of surveillance in your direction if you embark on a path of speaking of certain things. It's just a fact. But I do believe that we were gifted with a certain amount of intelligence and beauty and strength. And for some, they have a decent combination of all of them. So they're smart, they're strong, they're very athletic, they can figure things out, and they're good looking, they're beautiful, they're attractive. The question is, what are we doing with these attributes while we're in the body? A lot of people that are just on this path of eating, defecating, consuming, entertaining themselves, and they're very interested in very little outside of that bubble. And for someone to evolve beyond this type of a world or matrix, one would have to evolve beyond that dichotomy or mentality of just living day to day and not questioning the afterlife or the possibility of having to stand before God for everything that we have done, having our heart weighted and examined, our good deeds versus our bad deeds. See, you don't hear talk like this from the church, where they're actively engaging their followers and their participants to be the best people that they can be. So, yeah, there's a lot of spiritual books out there. You can go to the spiritual section, metaphysical section, you come up with all types of stuff. And as I've been saying to you guys over and over and over, it seems like the vast majority of the New Age movement is on this bandwagon of promoting certain political misleaders and talking about 5D, right? 5D. I've been hearing this stuff since the 90s, the whole 3D to 4D to 5D. And it's the idea of humanity being rescued. And there's no evidence to suggest that humanity is stopping in its tracks from its unconscious progress forward over the cliff. And we have so much further as far as a society to fall, as far as hitting bottom. It could be way worse than it is right now, which is scary, but it's important that you know that. And there's a lot of different potential dystopian realities that are awaiting us. Sure, there will be consciousness and spirituality to a certain degree on this planet, including miracles, but ultimately this is a quarantine planet for souls at a certain level. So it's not really easy to just give a simple answer to why does God allow these entities to roam and to haunt us. But I do think that we should be examining what we're doing, this type of a reality to begin with. So that includes karma, actions that we have done in the past. We have to really question what we really are beyond human beings, beyond our gender. And I think that it is important to ponder what a more fair society really looks like and how would we create it? How would we reform the system if we actually had the opportunity to reform the system? That's something that I briefly took a stab at a few weeks ago or a month ago when it comes to how good men could reform the system in a world of bad men and bad institutions. The truth is, we wouldn't be allowed to. But for the sake of future generations, they should have a good grasp of what went down here on planet Earth. Because there's constantly going to be the manipulation of history. Who knows how history is going to be manipulated in the future as they look back on the year 2020 or 2021. I would caution you against being in a typical mainstream conspiracy theorist mindset that makes it all about the 2020 election and the idea of Joe Biden rigging it. I would advise you to understand that our elections are rigged no matter who wins, whether it's one guy or the other. The same thing goes for the election in 2024. No matter who wins this upcoming election in 2024, we lose. People that desire freedom and true equality and prosperity in this nation and around the world, they're not moving up in the world right now. They're coming under a greater and greater level of control. Yeah, so know when to stand back from the chaos, to step back from YouTube and BitChute and streaming video content, and know how to keep yourself grounded in the real world, thinking for yourself, reading actual books from the library, checking out DVDs here and there. So I have a couple DVDs here that I'm going to go over. I don't recall seeing Juice with Tupac. I'm not necessarily a Tupac fan, but I may check out the movie. Here's Dr. Sleep from Stephen King. This is the next chapter in The Shining Story. So on the topic of dark psychics, that is people with psychic powers that are not of the light but are basically vampires, this is a very interesting horror film that brings that idea to light, right? So just because someone's psychic or has psychic abilities doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good person or using their abilities for the highest good. The Goonies, filmed in Oregon. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And a movie here that I have not seen called Retina. A young woman participates in a medical study. After a series of nightmares and unusual side effects, the line between dreams and reality is blurred. She finds herself on the run from those involved, desperate to uncover the truth. Again, I highly recommend Dr. Sleep. I wasn't able to get through the actual Stephen King book. But yes, this is a period of less light. As I said, this is a period in which historically I've noticed an increase in spiritual attacks. And the human beings that are engaged in formulating the spiritual attacks may not actually be cognitive and conscious of their own actions, of their own uncontrolled thoughts. But when it comes to violence in the streets, when it comes to road rage, when it comes to other things, yeah, I think that people should be a little bit more in control of their own actions. But like I said, it's easy to predict these periods in which we're going to see an increase in instability from the population. Those are times where you might want to step back from going out as much. And that includes the taking of certain trips. So a couple things here that I jotted down. The requirement of the soul to evolve beyond this kind of a reality we are in. We talked about that already. The reality of spiritual warfare for those going down the path of freeing themselves. Okay, so somebody might come under spiritual attack when they start to increase their light and their meditation. When they step back from maybe a certain level of programming. Could be hatred, could be classism, it could be some other in-the-box way of thinking. They can also come under attack from family, and that's really its own subject that we could talk about. But I did say earlier, if you are able to communicate your light with family during this holiday season, and if there are family members that you have, I think that's a very special thing to cherish and to have in your life. Family members that are receptive to the intelligence that you have. Because if they're not going to be receptive to the intelligence that you have, why bother with a Christmas card? Why bother with boosting the stocks of the Hallmark Corporation or some other corporation, or giving more money to the United States Postal Service? as we ship items across the country. See, we need to continue to articulate what a more conscious world actually looks like. As if this is a requirement, folks, to actually end up in one of those higher consciousness places. The reality of the unseen forces in our world, God allows it to be for our growth, while giving us the tools to overcome them and free others. So it's like a cheat from a video game. Through trial and error and certain experiences, we may come to understand that we were gifted with certain tools and abilities, ways of protecting ourselves, ways of protecting others. I do understand why religious folks believe so sincerely in their way being the only way, but I don't believe, as most religious folks do, that there has to be a certain recitation in a certain language to quote a certain God by a quote certain name. I think that the truth to overcoming these forces has been actually shared with people around the world in different languages. So I think where your heart is very, very important. Again, the heart could be seen as a candle that the evil of this world, that the corruption of this world, that the darkness of this world seeks to blow out. And by blowing out the candle, you have human beings with what? Blackened hearts. How many times have you thought to yourself, wow, that individual, it's like their heart is black. Where does that thinking come from? Maybe it comes from the inner knowing that some of these people, they do not have a strong flame or light in their heart chakra. And in fact, they're going to be allergic to other human beings that do have a strong flame in their heart. So begin to truly understand, what is a real friend? What does real community look like? Sharing truth in your community, from putting out your own show in your own living room and handing it out, or creating a local blog with podcasts. Talked about that in another recording. There's plenty of ways in which you can truth your local community. You can put up a piece of paper at a health food store at the bulletin board and talk about certain things. You want to be intelligent with what words you use. You need to know your demographic. The people at the health food store are going to be of a certain demographic, usually left-leaning, but not always. So they may be resistant to certain words that are viewed as words that conspiracy theorists might use. So you might want to think outside the box of using certain words that they're going to judge and go, oh, that sounds like another right-winger conspiracy theorist. Yeah, overcoming the illusions of separation and religious differences and politics are necessary to overcoming the challenges that we face. So this is just a core tenet here. When it comes to groups, and if you try to organize a group in your local community, it's not going to be successful, folks, with a bunch of people with their own political worship ideologies. I've already tried that in Portland. And I think that I, as an individual, am pretty welcoming of people with different ideologies, as long as they're not nasty people, as long as they don't want everybody to be enslaved. I understand there's going to be differences of opinions. What I come across, unfortunately, over the years is being judged like all the rest, like I'm another Alex Jones. I've told you some stories in which people have a bias against anything perceived to be conspiracy theory because of that man and the damage that he did to their mental health. I understand that, and I've talked about that at great length and detail. That's not gonna change things, however. The damage has been done. The damage that he and others have created in the so-called movement has been done and cannot be easily mediated or corrected. It was way easier for me to reach out to people 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and talk about some of these things on the streets, either be on the streets of Portland, Oregon, or somewhere else in the United States. Now, it's a whole different situation. steering clear from Orthodox religious folks and other Orthodox conspiracy figures. I would also say, I know there's a bunch of religions out there with a lot of different books. There's the Bible, there's the Quran, there's the Hare Krishna book, there's the Buddhist texts, there's the Torah, but I'm talking about a modern instruction guide for the human being in order to navigate the modern realities and corrupt religious organizations and leaders. Just going to continue with some of these thoughts. Definitely, this is a backwards world where the corrupted and non-intelligent are promoted more easily than those that are less corrupt and more intelligent. We have to realize that there is a modern war on the real independent media. For example, Portland Reddit banning YouTube links or any all non-mainstream media content. So, how the corruption of the mainstream conspiracy movement has actually boosted public trust of the mainstream media, especially for those on the left. So they have this mentality now that everything from the mainstream media is accurate. The situation with the recent health event, as you know, has further balkanized the left and the right. So there are many people out there that will trust the mainstream now and anything the mainstream says, because of the infiltration of the conspiracy movement, which they know nothing about. They're looking at all conspiracy people now in the same way. Lower class, lower intelligent, lower quality human beings, and overall bad people. That is the mentality. But as I explained to you earlier, if someone was to come to me personally and say, Alex, I have a friend who's into conspiracy theories, it would be great for you to meet him. The questions that I have to do with, is this person outside the box of tribalism? Does this person think for himself or herself? Or are they being currently contaminated and brainwashed by many, many figures that are out there? Because if that's the case, in some cases, it's almost better to not know them. And so it's not that the left is right. They're wrong in judging everybody that talks about 9/11 or the New World Order as a right-winger, but there is a reason how they came about to that bias and understanding, okay? But there's a lot of ways in which people could get around that by not buying into the propaganda of certain media figures. And so because humanity is so easily programmable and led into the illusions of separation and so many other flawed thinking programs, it's easy then for those groups to be dehumanized and demonized. And so, I'm not trying to make this very complicated, but we'll come back to this again and again and again. It's like the whole thing was done on purpose to bring up the so-called truth movement and then to destroy it through very specific means. In the same way in which bombs might be set off, for example, of a building in certain places to cause it to fall down in free flow. In the same way that may have happened, we can look at what's happening now. And many people say, do people even use that language anymore? Truth movement. In a certain aspect of our culture, percentage, yes, and or patriot movement. But it's so controlled. And to try to explain to the people that are consuming that content that it's controlled is almost a near possibility. But I do appreciate those emails that I have received that have reminded me that I have, as they put it in some cases, woken them up to the deceptions of certain human beings out there, from Alex Jones to others. And so for that, I appreciate it. So, certain places on the planet emit their own frequency. For example, the earth prana of certain cities like Portland draws in spiritual attacks on the population, especially during certain celestial times or solar flares. One needs to know how to protect themselves in such places and to use the energies wisely. Okay, so in some of these areas, there may be like a rich amount of natural earth energy, and it's all in what you do with it. In Portland, where there's a lot of promiscuous activity and drug use and alcoholism, and how all of that is absolutely normalized, somebody could misuse the natural forces of energy by partying too much, instead of maybe do something creative like write a book or expand their spirituality. And I've also come across other videos on YouTube that have suggested that certain regions may have their own like archonic spirit that's like an overseer. And there could be other lower spirits that may be working on the behalf of some of those larger archonic spirits, um, lower spirits that are basically jumping the bodies of the human beings and causing them to commit murders or sexual assaults or certain types of crimes or robberies in order to cause people to suffer, because pain and suffering to these beings or entities is believed to be by many to be some sort of a sustenance. So places where there's a lot of suffering historically and currently is a place where there's a lot of these beings. And so for people that have to live and work in these environments, and sometimes it could be seen by a rise in certain types of addicted homeless. Not all homeless are addicted to drugs, but in some areas in the US, in some specific streets, the vast majority of the homeless that you may see, for example, Portland, Oregon again, for years, Old Town, Chinatown. It's not exactly the part of town in which every homeless person is going to be seen, but you'll specifically see those that are suffering from some sort of drug addiction. And there'll also be a reason why in some cities there will be an increase in drug sales as opposed to other neighborhoods. And nobody will ever seem to understand why that is or what's really going on there. But unresolved trauma from the past that lingers in the air, even if it occurred 150 years ago or 200 years ago, or longer, is still energy that can corrupt the humans in the modern day and age, especially if they're sleeping with the wrong people. Not that all sex is wrong, it's that so many people now are infected with these spirits and are passing them back and forth, combined with the drinking, combined with certain environments and activities, and perhaps things that people choose to watch, either on the internet or on TV or certain other activities. Now, on the topic of Portland being expensive and sought out, there is very little chatter about Portland content creators like myself being considered absolutely worthless. And so, on that note, there's an obsession with all things Portland now. And maybe even Portland nostalgia, certainly Portland real estate, as the price of a home in Portland, Oregon is absolutely astronomical. But this is how unconscious the humans are. They're looking at physical things. They're looking at like rental properties. Meanwhile, they're displacing Portlanders and treating certain Portlanders like they have no worth whatsoever. That would be the Portlanders that came before them and may have some decent ideas about things. And so, I might try to reach out to Portlanders with my episodes that I'm uploading. But is there going to be a warm reception? Or is there going to be some sort of an attitude, a bias against me for either sounding conspiratorial, not being in a fancy studio, or not living up to one of their other expectations? So we've talked about those many, many expectations in the modern society that leads people, unfortunately, astray into tribalism and to listening to people that constantly lie to them and intentionally try to put them in fear. Meanwhile, other people that might have more valuable information for them, that are straight up born in the city that these people love so much, it just makes me really wonder what is wrong with them for so many people in Portland, Oregon, to be under a spell that the content that I create is less than par. right? So we'll come back to this conversation in the future. But in the modern day Americult, which we're in, the more subjects are discussed, because I obviously talk about a lot of different subjects, the more it's going to alienate certain audience members that are only able to handle certain truths. So if you just talk about certain conspiracy theories or left-leaning ideas or right-leaning ideas, or the idea that the sun is dying, or mind control theories, MK Ultra, or UFOs, it's way easier to obtain a large audience. And the idea of having a large audience is that, if you're looking for support from the audience, in a world in which it's next to impossible now to make any ad money as a content creator, so it's important that you attract people to your work, but it's very, very difficult. And frustrating to know that some of the topics are not for everybody. It could be argued that one could be a lot more successful if they just create a number of different websites based on themes. But that also takes a lot of work. And I'm going to be 44 soon. So I'm not necessarily planning on doing that. But I'm saying in a more ideal reality, one shouldn't have to feel like they got to censor their own truth. Like they got to have 5 websites or 10 websites. The intelligence that they have and their other gifts and talents should be appreciated, all of them. Instead of a human being, because of the modern mind control, feeling like they can't talk about that too much, or they can't talk about this too much. Otherwise, they're going to lose people, because people are at a certain level, a certain dumbed down level, where they're only able to take in certain bits of information or concepts. And that's very, very frustrating. The other influence of the modern day and age is that long videos are bad, but YouTube shorts are good. TikTok even better. Things for the modern attention span: 5 seconds, 4 seconds. No, wait, 3 seconds. Wait, I'm sure we can get into video that's only 2 seconds. And literally, like, this is where we are. This is where we are. Yeah, so in conclusion, people need to figure out where they are if they want to navigate themselves out of where we are. And there is still too much denial. Still too many people lost in ego that don't want to hear about their own local town criticized, their own local country criticized, their own planetary consciousness criticized. They actually take it personally. And that is a major, major flaw in human consciousness. Be an individual. Do not allow yourself to be boxed in with the herd. Right? If the herd had it so figured out, we would be in a much different situation right now on the planet. There would be a lot more community building on the internet. The tools are there, folks. The tools are there for us to do amazing, positive things once intelligent, conscious people find each other. And what exactly has society done in the last 20, 30, 40 years since the advent of the internet? They have become more addicted to social media, more addicted to personal drama, more addicted to Amazon shopping, more addicted to video games. And so things are going to get worse, folks, before they get better. I want to thank you for listening to this impromptu discourse for December 13th, 2023. We'll talk to you next time.